Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jason with JWClassicVW, and we're back in the garage, guys! Shooting that video, that Volkswagen engine rebuild video on 40 horsepower engines, to be more specific. So, let me turn you around real quick and show you what's going on just a little bit before we do the intro. So there we go. I got the engine set up, kind of like to mock up the teardown. I'm putting it back together right now, just a little bit, so I can show you guys some of the essential stuff you need to know when it comes to tearing apart your stock Volkswagen engine. If you have been wondering, and you've been curious, and you've been wondering, what have you been doing, Jason? Oh, gathering lots of information, getting stuff together so I can provide you guys with a really good technical breakdown of what you need to do to rebuild your Volkswagen engine. Rebuild your stock Volkswagen engine. So, stay tuned, guys. Lots of good stuff coming after this intro. See you in a second. And welcome back, guys. Yeah, all of that work putting this back together so I can kind of show you how it comes apart and talk to you about some of the things you need to look for on your Volkswagen engine before you like order bearings and cam and all that kind of stuff. So in this first episode, guys, we're gonna be talking about, or this first video on your VW engine rebuild, we're gonna be talking about things to look for, things to watch out for, and damage that may occur, and whether or not you got to worry about it when it comes to your rebuild. There are some things that you might injure or damage, and there's some things that you're going to be replacing just as part of your rebuild. We're going to break this rebuild up into, and as I go through the rebuild, I'm going to talk to you about different types of rebuilds that people do. There's top-end rebuilds, there's full tear apart the engine block rebuilds, and I would say that for most of us Volkswagen guys, we fall into one of two categories. Somebody that's comfortable with cracking the case, and somebody that is like scared to death of cracking their VW case open and getting to work on possibly a line bore or polishing up your crank before you put new bearings on there. There are some things you can do to save money, but there's also some things that you should not skimp on and or skip to save money. So guys, turn you around. Let's start tearing this thing apart and talk about some of those things you need to look out for. So guys, here we go. Some of you that have been subscribers for a long time are gonna recognize my 40 horsepower tins. They're pretty dirty because I've been sitting up out of the way, which they're about to go back up out of the way right now as I take some of this stuff off, because this is just put together for demonstration purposes. Take off the single port manifold first. And of course, you're gonna have a little bit more difficulty when it comes to cleaning and stuff when you go and do yours, guys, because that's just the truth. Now, some of you are gonna have the like stock thermostat system installed, and this is not like a stock fan setup. It doesn't have the screw holes or any of that other kind of stuff here for where those fins would be. Now, there are quite a few people out there that are firm believers in leaving this in, and I understand that because it's stock and it helps get the engine to operating temperature faster, but I've removed these things forever and I've never had any issues, so I just run a shroud without it. And this is the type of shrouding that's smaller, the fan shrouding that's smaller, and has this smaller fan that goes with the alternator or generator, whichever one you decide to install. So we'll be running the smaller fan because you don't need a bigger fan with a stock type of setup. And this rebuild is going to be a 1641 which is a little bit bigger than the stock 1600, obviously. All right. Single port cylinder tins. Let's get this stuff out of the way. And the heads, what we're also going to be doing, guys, with this, this stuff falling all over the place, with these rebuilds is installing some solid rocker shafts instead of the wavy washer rocker shafts on the cylinder heads. So that's something to look forward to as we go through this. In one of my earlier videos that I'll link up in the description over here, we already went through how to lap the valves, and these single port cylinder heads have already had the valves lapped. Now, one of the things you can do to improve horsepower on a single port head, and I've seen lots of guys do this with turbo applications and beefing up their springs and stuff, is porting out the single port itself. Now, you could probably do that, but we're not going to be looking to do that. But that is an option for one of the horsepower increases, you know, you could do. Flow is everything. Airflow is everything in these engines. And if you're trying to get a little bit of extra horsepower, porting out your cylinder head might be an option for you. Now, something that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pull out your valves when you do all that, because you don't want to get everything all dirty and stuff in there. Hey, look at guys. I CC'd these things way back in the day. All right, guys, stepping away from the video for 1 second just to remind you to don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this content if you're enjoying what you're watching, which I know you are, guys. All this good stuff, good information, tidbits, and tips on how to build your Volkswagen engine, your stock Volkswagen engine. If you're interested in building a bigger engine, don't forget to check out the 2276 Monster Build video series up there. Yeah, sweaty, guys. Got the fan on, too, because it is getting hot. Hot down here in Texas. Now, back to the video. Okay, guys, we're back over here at the engine. You can see that, of course, the crank is not in here because during the mock-up assembly, that was not going in so friendly-like. So what we're looking at is the breakdown of your, what would be short block or long block if you still have your heads on, which hopefully you don't. Sometimes the cylinders coming off, you'll, excuse me, sometimes with the cylinders coming off, you're gonna have some issues with how difficult it is to come off with these, and having a rag or a sometimes a 2x4 here to help you out is preferable if you are having difficulties. You're probably going to end up replacing your pistons and cylinders anyway, because for the price you might as well put a new set in there. Now these are the upgraded size. They're not the 77 mil or the 83 mil. These are actually the 85.43 mil cylinders. I don't know if you guys can see that in there or not. See where it says 85? I don't know. Can you guys see that? Right there. 85.45 mil, guys. And that's what gives us the 1641 when it comes to our engine size versus a 1600, which that would be the 83 millimeter pistons. Now, like I was saying, you're probably going to have a little bit more difficulty when it comes to taking this apart, but we'll go ahead and look at popping one of these pistons out of here in a second and talk to you about what you need to look for on whether or not you can just go ahead and replace your rings, or you want to go ahead and replace your whole set, you know, not just the rings, but the pistons themselves. Ooh, that one's in there good. Good and tight. Yeah. A lot of this is for demonstration purposes, just to kind of go through the flow when it comes to just disassembly itself. Now, let's see. Having a mallet like this is helpful when it comes to popping these off. I can tell you that the first time I took this apart, I ended up having to beat out the cylinders because of just corrosion that had kind of taken over the engine, because it had been sitting out, I guess, for a while, and that's no bueno. So we're gonna go ahead and look through, break down an inspection of the crank, the pistons, the cam, all the internals of the block itself today, and then kind of get together a parts list of what kind of stuff we need for starting the reassembly. But this is just a great time to inspect everything and get a good listing of what you're gonna need to put it all back together. You don't wanna get like halfway through your build and then start ordering parts and be like, oh man, I forgot this, or oh man, I forgot that, because that's no bueno. Now, when you look at the side here and you're at the point where, let me zoom you guys in a little bit so you can see better. So let's bring you guys in a little bit on the block. So you're looking at the block itself and you're pulling out all the screws. There's tons of hardware on here. Let's go ahead and count how many of the smaller 13 millimeters there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, on the bottom side now. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 of the 13 millimeter screws, guys, or bolts and nuts that go around the outside perimeter of the block. And then you have the main bearing studs right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 6 of those. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, you want to make sure you don't miss any of these, because you go to start splitting your case apart, you're gonna have all kinds of problems. Now, after you get your heads off and you get your pistons off, and you can see that I've already pulled out the studs for the head studs right here, because I wanted to inspect and make sure that everything was good on the head studs. And I'll go ahead and run a tap through each one of these before I go ahead and run some red Loctite and put the studs back in. But you're gonna wanna take out your oil pump. Now they have oil pump pullers out there that work out really good for this, but honestly, if you get the case splitting apart, the oil pump will just kind of fall out. Yeah, y'all. As you're taking it apart, you want to pay attention though, because these little studs, these little 10 millimeter studs right here, or well, they're not 10 millimeter, but the 10 millimeter bolt, those little studs here, I think they're like 8 millimeter studs, are super fragile, and you can break those real easy. One of the things you want to pay attention to when you're taking all this apart is whether or not you're going to reuse your hardware. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and order a new hardware kit, since you're going to be doing all this anyway. And the new hardware comes with nylon washers kind of built onto this new hardware. It makes it a little bit different than the little flex washers or wavy washers that come with it. So your pump is not going to come off this easy, because, well, it just isn't. It's going to be a little more difficult. We're going to go ahead and look at the pump here in a second too, because there's things you want to pay attention to on your oil pump, and also the cover when it comes to inspection. So you can put a case splitter in here and split the case apart, but I don't really have to do that because mine's pretty darn loose as it is. One of the things you do want to pay attention to before you break the case open is you want to go ahead and lock out your lifters. Your lifters inside of here, because if you lose track of which lifter goes where, you're going to be replacing your lifters, because orientation when it comes to your lifters is definitely important. You don't want to forget where it went to. You guys like that? I use an old distributor as a spacer. So you can get a couple hangers and make some of these lifter clips, but these are pretty cheap. And when you're ordering your parts and materials, you might want to go ahead and just pick up one of these as well. Not a bad idea to get a couple of these, but you can make something like this out of hangers pretty easily. Let me back you guys back out to a more open view, so you can see better what's going on. So drop these down inside here, your clips to hold your lifters in place. Like I was saying, guys, the lifters, you want to make sure you keep track of where they go, because if you get them mixed up, you're going to be replacing them, and you're probably going to be putting a different cam in or a new cam. But if you're trying to save money, you don't want to mix this up. And let's just say you're getting in here to replace your bearings and maybe just polish off your crank, then you're going to want to keep track of where the lifters go. Now let's see if I can get this to separate without too much trouble. I'm going to go ahead and take a second and point out something else real quick. Let's see if I can get a light behind here so you guys can see what's going on. Bring you guys down inside the main bearing area, because it's kind of cool to look down inside of there and see what you should be looking for. This is one of the first and easiest checks to do, is I put a light behind my main bearing area, and you can look down in there and see. That's kind of hard. Okay, there you go. It's a little less glare. You can see if you have any crazy outer roundness going on. Bring you guys in a little bit more for a better view. There you go. I don't see any major damage or major issues that would make me think that there's any serious outer round going on inside of my bearing surface area. We'll get a better look at one way of checking this once we crack the case open, guys. And this is a standard case, so it's never been line bored, but we will probably end up going ahead and getting it line bored just for video purposes. That'd be kind of cool, right? All right, back you guys back out again. Once again, we are minding the surfaces when we crack this open. Using screwdrivers, as long as you pay attention to where you're putting it, is not super dangerous, but you definitely want to be careful, because what you're doing is you're working this off the dowels that are inside of the case. And it's just a little bit of wiggling back and forth. And there she goes. Dang it, see? Lost the lifter. Just lost one though. I can reach up in here and push up on these two. That's good. When you hear that fall, you know right away that it's a lifter. And get it off and then flip it over. Find your lifter that fell in. Put it back in the case. And then you can pull out your clips, because now everything is where it's supposed to be. Now, an easy way to kind of keep track of which lifter goes where at this point is just to, let's see, want to get something up underneath this side? How about you, Mr. Oil Pump? You want to help out? Hey, there we go. Okay, so you've got your case split, and what you're gonna have is you're gonna have your crank and all your bearings in here. That's just the way it's gonna be. Your crank's not gonna be broken down like mine is. I've already got it torn apart. I've got I got my crank gear off of here. I've got my distributor drive gear off of here already, and the circlip that holds it all in place. It's already been pulled off. You have to have a special tool to do that. Don't try to use some homemade or baloney tool. Go ahead and just buy the correct tool for pulling off all the gears. And this is what it looks like. This is what you need to pull your gears off of your crank. Check out the description below, guys, in the video. The description down and below in the video, and I will link a location for where I picked mine up at. I can't remember if I got this off Amazon or if I actually picked it up at one of the different websites. So you can pull off your cam. There's a good chance that when you pull your cam out that the bearings themselves might come with the cam. Don't worry about that, because we're replacing all those anyway. This is a good time to check your bearings. We'll start off with the cam bearings because we're here. Check your cam bearings for any kind of issues. I'm going to bring you guys down in a little bit closer so you can see that. All right, guys, we're right on top of the lifters themselves and the cam bearings. On this side right here, the side of the case that's down towards the bottom that has the crank. And you know this is the crank side too, because it has all the oil galleries in it here. The other side does not have the oil galleries like this for the crank. This side, we're gonna go ahead and look. This is the 3/4 side. So this is an exhaust lifter and an exhaust lifter, intake lifter, intake lifter. So we're gonna go ahead and first put on here number 3. Oh, of course my marker's dead. Oh. Use a permanent marker, guys, because this is the Sharpie and it's just gonna come off, but to give you an idea. 3, 3, 4, 4, and then you put the intake, or actually this is exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust. And now you have your lifters marked so you know where they go. It's a good idea to go ahead and mark the box or whatever you stick them into as well so you know which one goes where. Zoom you in a little bit more on the bearing surfaces so we can take a look at them. First, you want to check and see if your bearings are loose. Like, are they easily removable, or do they move freely inside of the area, this journal here for your cam? And if they don't, then hey, guess what? That's pretty good because they're tight. We're gonna pull up your bearing, and let's see if we can zoom you guys in a little bit. You want to take a look at your bearing surface, look for pitting, scoring. These bearings aren't in awful shape because they're honestly pretty new. This has been through a rebuild recently and hasn't been ran too much, but you can look at your bearings and you can also find out if they're standard size or if it's like the case has received a line bore or opened up at all. But I don't think I've ever seen the cam journal area line board. I don't think I've ever seen it before, but I do know you can do the same thing with the crank. So take a look at your bearings. Do they look like they're in crap? You're cracking the case anyway. We're gonna go ahead and replace the cam bearings because for the price, it's worth it. Let's back you guys back up, get a far out view of both sides of the case. All right, now to check out your main bearings and see what they look like, and maybe the sizes as well. And sizes are always on these guys and gals. Right there, you can make out the standard that's on this bearing, maybe. Well, it's on there. I don't know if you can see it or not. I'll put my hand behind here. Maybe that'll help with the zoom. There you go. Standard bearing. And this is the first way to check and see if your case is jacked up, guys, is you can take your standard bearing, this one right here, that's got the thrust sides on it, and put it in the back and see, pop it down in there and then try to pull it out. And if it fits tight and you don't have any wiggle, like this side, I don't have there's a little, not very much, but a little tiny bit. But if it fits down in there and you can pop it out, then you probably are good to go on not having to get a line bore. You can probably just clean up your surfaces. The next thing you want to go ahead and do to check it is take your fingernail and run it along the bearing surface, and does it catch? And if it doesn't catch, like mine, this doesn't catch, zoom in. Doesn't catch with my nail, then you're probably in good shape to go ahead and stick with the standard. And like we did before with viewing down through the actual case, we didn't see any major issues. And I'm not having any kind of catching. And what you're looking for is to see if the bearings have been beat into the case so badly that the actual numbering and or the oiling line has left an indentation in the case. And it doesn't. I can take this bearing and move it down through and check. And everything feels pretty darn good. You don't want to do it just with this side. You want to go ahead and check your other side of the case as well. So let's move over there for a second. So, how's it fit? Pretty good. Backside. Oh, see? Backside on this one? It's a little loose. Not bad though. It sticks still, see? There you go. That's what you're looking for. Now what happens is if your end play is not set correctly on your engine, your thrust surface on the back side of your case, this area here, will need to be cut as well. And there are numerous sizes of bearings for once this is thrust cut. And this thrust cutting is done by your machinist. So hopefully you have a local VW shop in your area that can go ahead and, once they line bore your case, redo the thrust cut on the backside as well. But we're looking pretty good. We're in pretty good shape so far, guys, with how this is going together and how it seems like everything is going to be a-okay when it comes to just ordering a set of standard bearings and then maybe just polishing up our crank a little bit. Now, besides looking at the bearing surfaces, the main bearings and the cam bearings, you need to take a look at your lifters at this point. I'm going to go ahead and just pull out the, what would that be? No, no, no. Hold on a second, guys. I'm trying to get my orientation correct. 1, 2, right? Yeah, so number 2. So let's pull out the, let's first go ahead and mark these, right? So this is gonna be number 2 and number 1. And this is gonna be, what's that, guys? Exhaust? All right. Intake, intake, exhaust. A way to check your lifters to see if they need to be reground or you're gonna order new lifters is how flat are the surfaces. There should be a little bit of concaveness, I think that's right, a little bit of roundness to your lifters to where they don't fit flat together. See, like these ones fit flat together, that means they're toast. That means your lifters are Dunsky. Oh man, I rubbed the numbers off. Dang it. We're replacing these anyway. So lifters go together and then back and forth. There should be a little bit of jarring going on there. You should be able to see a little bit of light through there because they should not be perfectly flat. And that's what people talk about when they're saying you've wiped out your lifters or you wiped out your cam. That means there was not a proper break-in, or it's just over time with these tappet type lifter cam setups, they just wear out and you lose power, you lose performance, or it just won't run right because you've wiped out your cam, you've wiped out your lifters. That's how it is. So these are all being replaced anyway. This is just for demonstration and example, so I really don't care where these go. They're gonna be kept for whatever. You never know when you're gonna need lifters for, like, I don't know, to pound together some adjustable, or you're cutting to length push rods, so you might need to keep a set of these around. Let's stick them off over here for now, out of the way. And we're gonna go ahead and take a look at the case itself and talk about what you need to look for on your case when it comes to, you know, damage and issues that may require you to replace the case. First thing you're gonna wanna look at is around your surface of your case. Look around the outside. Do you see any noticeable issues with the case? Are there any cracks along the main studs? Any cracks along the mating surface itself? Chips, missing material? At this point, guys, like, there's not really too many people out there that do repairs to cases, so it's probably gonna be best to pick up a good used case or a new one, which, yeah, there goes the budget. So checking for any kind of hairline cracks, any kind of issues when it comes to the mating surface itself. If it's jacked up, it's time to get a new case. Now on the outside, the same way. We're looking at things just like that. Let's put the case together, put the halves back together, and kind of go over some of that stuff. All right, guys. So on the back side of your case, you got the number 3 side of your cylinder. And this is the side that you see on newer cases where they actually fill this in to provide strength, because there's not a whole lot of strength if you open this up to a larger size. But on a stock application like we have here, where we're just wanting to make sure that it's good to go for stock rebuild, which on a single relief case, on the bottom of this, it's just got the one relief valve on the front instead of like a second one on the back. You're not gonna go super big on this, guys. You're gonna keep this probably at its largest, a 1641, and that's what I have. Now, if you're building it bigger than that out there, go for it, but I don't recommend it. It's you're bound to destroy your case. It's gonna happen with that kind of power going through this bad boy. So you'll see this filled in, but this is where you wanna look at on this case for over time, cracks, stress fractures down through the back of the case, stress cracks around the bearing surfaces themselves where the bearing seats. This is where you're gonna find if there's any kind of beat out or jacked up issues with the back side where the thrust surface is, where your bearing is going back and forth. And you guys check an end play, you know what I'm talking about with checking end play, right? If you walk up to an engine and you grab onto the front pulley, and I've got like this one for demonstration here, the front crank pulley, and you can pop it back and forth, and it's still together, and you got the flywheel on there still, and you've got loads of movement, then you've got a problem. You're probably gonna find all kinds of issues with your bearing surfaces internally, and you're gonna need to get a line bore. If not, replace your case. On the outside, you're also looking at where the cylinder meets the case. looking for cracks in between the studs themselves. Are there case savers inside of your engine on the block? Have they inserted case savers? Are you missing any case savers? So you're taking notes of all this stuff, guys, because these are the things that you're going to have to replace if it's missing when you go to do the rebuild. You don't want to start putting your engine together and realize, holy crap, I'm missing a case saver, and then you're hunting around trying to find one. On the top side, looking for the same thing. Where your oil cooler goes in, check and make sure that the surface looks like it's good, that you don't have any major issues with the surface where the oil cooler is going to mount. Internal right here, you want to make sure that the holes aren't jacked up, that there's no cracking here from overheating. This is all checking for overheating, which is one of the notorious things that you'll find most of these issues come from, is when the engine has overheated at some point. Surfaces where your push rods go in shouldn't be too damaged, but you want to check for any kind of issues inside where the lifters are going to be and the push rods are going down through. Bottom side is one of the most important things, because when these engines sit for a long time, you'll see that the area here where water will collect and the filter strain and the oil filter cover down here are going to be jacked up. Studs will be missing, studs will not be in there. You'll see erosion where the case has started to erode away to the studs. Those are all signs of it's time for a new case. These tabs right here where your tin mounts on, make sure that those are there. If they're not there, you're going to have some problems. You're going to be doing some finagling to try to figure out how to get your tin to mount up correctly. Most of the time, you'll find that these things are hollowed out, so you're going to have to use different kind of hardware anyway. But if you're looking around your case, your mating surfaces look good, your bearing surfaces look pretty good, everything seems pretty decent. Oh, by the way, guys, this is an F-type case. Came out of like a 66, I think. Then the last thing I would probably do is take your engine case to a builder that you, or a VW shop that you trust, and have them take a look at it. Have them give you the okay and whether or not it needs to be line bored. Line boring usually costs 100 to 200 bucks to have it done, and then the cost of the bearings, because they'll match up your bearings for your crank as well. Money well spent, guys, especially on a rebuild like this and how much time you're going to spend. Cool. That's the case inspection. If you guys got any kind of comments, any kind of more information that you should look at when it comes to your case, comment below, guys, because I know there's going to be a lot of good information out there. And don't forget to hop on over to the Facebook group or the Instagram page and put your comments there as well, because this is going to be some good stuff, some good information for all of us out there that are trying to rebuild the VW engine and have possibly never taken apart the case halves themselves. All right, guys, moving on to the next inspection criteria, or next inspection item, is going to be the oil pump. Let's get the case out of the way. All right, guys, it is oil pump time. Here's an oil pump. This is just a standard oil pump used, I think, I'm not sure on the mil size on these, but one of the first things you're going to want to look at is your gears and how they fit inside the oil pump housing. Does it feel super sloppy? Some of the stuff seems obvious, but it's not always obvious. Does it feel sloppy? Does it feel like you have a nice tight fit? Then your housing is probably good to go. Another thing you want to look at with your housing itself is trueness across the face. Find a straight edge. I have a square right here. Find a straight edge, and then take that straight edge and then put it across the face of your pump and look for any gaps. Is the oil pump flat across the front? Has it been warped? Has it been overheated? And do you have to go ahead and resurface your oil pump and or replace your oil pump? Resurfacing, probably not going to happen, but you may need to replace your oil pump. This one seems like it's in pretty good shape, so we should be good to go. Next thing you want to look at beside the housing is the gears. How are the gears fitting together? Do they feel nice and tight? Do you see any damage, overscoring, pitting? Do they look like they've been sitting inside water for a long period of time? That's a no good sign, guys. We don't want that to happen. So get up nice and close. Take a look for any kind of chips, any kind of issues with the gears. These ones look like they're in pretty good shape. Put them back inside the housing. They should fit easy, guys. They shouldn't go in hard. and then operate the gears. Oh yeah, smooth operation, no hang-ups, no catching. We've got a pretty good looking oil pump here, guys, so reusing this one should be a-okay. Next thing you want to look at is your oil pump cover. Same things apply here with the cover. You want to go ahead and make sure, and this you can kind of clean off and resurface a little bit. Is it true? Taking your straight edge across the oil pump cover. Nice and flat. This all comes into play with oil pressure. That's why you can't get crazy when using gaskets on your oil pump, because if you don't have the right gasket buildup, or if you have too much buildup, guess what, guys? You ain't gonna have no oil pressure, and that is an engine killer. That's the oil pump, guys. Real easy, real simple, good to go. Let's move on to the cam. Now, I've already talked to you guys about this, and I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways to look at a cam and whether or not you need to replace it, but the first thing you need to look at is your lobes. Does it look like your cam's burnt? The bearing surfaces, do they look okay? This stock cam actually looks like in pretty good shape. You could take a high grit sandpaper, and I mean that like 1,000, 800, and go ahead and polish out your crank, or I mean polish out crank and your cam. These surfaces look pretty good for stock, but we're gonna probably go ahead and install a cheater cam on this. Also, when you're looking at your cam, these rivets here can come loose sometimes. Take it and hold on to it. You could even put it into a vise, like on the front, just hold the cam in place and then see if these rivets are loose. These rivets are not loose at all. Feels pretty good, probably a good cam. We could probably reuse this if we wanted to, and we may still reuse it. That really depends on your budget, guys, and what you're trying to do when it comes to spending too much money or spending a little bit extra money to get a little bit more lift, a little bit more flow of air through your engine. This cam looks pretty good. One of these things that I will probably go ahead and let my VW shop, my local VW shop here, and what I'm talking about with that, guys, is I like to use Henry at Bugaholics. I will take it by over there and let him take a look and say, hey, what do you think, man? Look good to go? Or should I go ahead and change out my cam? And they do have stock cams available at websites like CB Performance. That's also where you can get the cheater cam that provides you with a little bit more lift. Moving on, guys. Let's take a look at the pistons. All right, guys, looking at the pistons, first things first, what you want to do is make sure that you've got your piston out of the cylinder, which, let's see, this thing's in there pretty good. Where's my mallet at? Let's just pound it out through the backside. Cool. Ooh, it's nice and oily still. This is a really new set that I purchased when I was doing this rebuild originally, so this should be in really good shape. Looking inside of your cylinders themselves, you shouldn't see any scoring. You shouldn't see, let's clean this out a little bit. You don't want to see any rust and or corrosion inside of your pistons. If you do, guess what, guys? It's either time to replace the pistons. You could probably try a rehone, but like I told you before, for the price, go ahead and just get a new set. Have you damaged any of the fins? Are your fins full of oil and grease and nastiness? Which they probably are. Probably gonna make a trip over to the car wash and just totally destroy the car wash by getting oil and grease all over the place. Yeah, I don't recommend that, but hey, gotta get stuff clean. If you got a local shop nearby where you can take it to a place that has a hot tank, we can dip all this stuff, that's even better. But like I said, I recommend just replacing your whole set. You can tell these are pretty much brand new. The real thing to look at here is the piston itself. How do the rings look? How does your oil slipper look down here? Compression rings, are they all right? Do they look good? You might want to pull them off and take a look and see. They come off pretty simple. How do they look? Do they look burnt, toasted? Are they brittle? Are they cracking? Are they crack-a-lacking? Pretty easy to find issues with these. If you're just going to be replacing the ring pack, then you'll see right away. Scoring, corrosion, issues along the surface from too much heat, issues along the surface of the piston from cracking and or corrosion getting inside from the engine sitting too long, because if people aren't operating their engines very much, you're going to have just the normal issues from not being ran. Detonation issues on top. Is there pitting? Is there any kind of unusual wears or scoring at the top of the piston, along the sides, along the skirt? Are there pieces of the skirt missing? That's a no-go. Sometimes there's weights inside of these for balancing. Does this have them in there? Yeah, right in here. See these weights? Weights for balancing the sides. Cool. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That's inspecting the piston, guys. Got any comments? Got anything else that you guys will look at when it comes to inspecting your piston? Comment below, guys, because I'm sure that everybody out there is curious about all the VW awesome mechanics out there and what they have to say. Yeah, see? If your pin still moves pretty freely, then that's cool. I remember when I first took this thing apart, these pins did not want to come out. No, sir. No, sir, they did not. Cylinder heads. So, what you'll see here first off is that this is a solid rocker, or a solid rocker shaft setup, which we'll be going over how to build that out in this build series. Rockers, you want to look at, the main thing you want to look at for your rockers, guys, is your adjusters. If you look at your adjuster feet and they look like they have been through hell and back again, like there's the surface looks all jacked up. Let's get in a little closer and see. The surface of your adjusters look all jacked up. Like these ones aren't awful, but it's probably time to replace them. If you see some mushrooming on these, cracking, the surfaces are just definitely been through it, order a new set of adjusters, guys. It's worth it. These nuts, like see how these ones are getting kind of rounded off just from being used so many times and being adjusted a million times? Replace the nuts. It might be a good time to go ahead and put that on your list of things to do, things to replace. If you're sticking with the wavy washers because it's a stock application and you're good to go with the wavy washers, then you're going to have more of a rocker that looks like, hold the show, guys. Like this. Whoa. These rockers right here have the wavy washers still inside of here. What you want to look for is that you do have wavy washers inside of your rocker assembly. Now, there should be wavy washers at each end, in the centers here, and at this end right there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 wavy washers, 4 rocker arm assembly. What happens is, just through operation, going back and forth like a million freaking trillion times over years and years, those wavy washers break down and they break into the case. And normally what you'll do is you'll find them, hopefully, inside of your cylinder head and not in the bottom of your engine, but sometimes they'll find their way down through into stuff that they shouldn't be into. So always, when you're doing your valve adjustment, take a look and see, do you have all of your wavy washers? Because if you don't, you might have some issues coming pretty soon. Also, looking at these adjusters, it's probably time to replace them. Let's zoom in a little bit, look at these ones. Yeah, not so bad. You look at this adjuster. Come on, zoom in correctly. Help me. There we go. See, it's kind of mushrooming a little bit. Not so bad. You might be able to take a file and kind of clean up a little bit, but you want to be careful with that because you need this surface to be there. This is what rides against the valves, man. Cool. So we went ahead and knocked out the rockers. Most important thing you look at with the rockers is, do you have all the wavy washers that you should have in your adjusters? Is it time to replace those? Good chance that these adjusters need to be replaced. Now with the cylinder head, the first thing that most of you guys are going to run into is probably missing studs on your cylinder heads. Now, I actually had to, this isn't the one. Hold on, where's my other cylinder head at? One of the old faithfuls, JB Weld. This is a stud that I went ahead and JB welded back into here, and it served a purpose. It kept my exhaust in place and no issues, but it might be a good idea to pick up a new set of cylinder heads if you have too many studs here broken off and or you've got cracks on the mating surfaces here. Like if you're looking at the surface of your head and you've got any kind of hairline cracks or major cracks going along here, like see, that's kind of like a hairline crack, the JB weld that's falling apart where the stud is. It might be time to go ahead and either replace that, because you're not going to find anybody that's probably going to weld it, guys. The welding of cylinder heads is something that is highly unlikely that it's going to happen. Looking inside of your cylinder head itself, let's zoom into one of the chambers. Cracks in between the valve and the spark plug seat right here. Cracks in between the valves are an issue. You're gonna want to probably take out your valves anyway and relap them. These ones have already been done. I've already lapped these. I've got a video on that. Check it out over here or over here. I don't know where it's gonna be, but how to lap in your valves. That is a really easy or simplistic way of doing a little valve job. It's always better to go ahead and get the correct valve job done if you've got the dough. But if you don't got the dough, then just lapping the valves is the way to go. All right, guys, let's take a look at the other side of the cylinder head. All right, guys, we've got the cylinder head flipped around now. Things you're gonna wanna look at when it comes to your cylinder head once you've got it out. Same thing, stress fractures, cracks along the surface. Let's zoom down in on the single port head itself. Ooh, it's grainy. I love 4K. Down here, you're looking for any kind of cracks. The studs, are you missing studs? Like this one right here. I gotta put a stud in on this one because it's missing the stud. But that's not a big deal. The threads are still good inside of there. See, good to go. One of the major things that you'll find when you're looking at an engine that's been sitting around for a while is corrosion and or breakdown inside around the valves. So if you get down inside of here and you're looking down at the valves themselves, across the valve surface area, let's see, there we go, nice and grainy. Zoom in. Looking down along the valve springs, you're looking to see if you have any cracks. Once you get the springs out with a spring compression tool, which I've gone through that before in one of my other videos, is you can compress these down and then take a look and see like, hey, do I see any issues with the springs? Do they look like any of these have been broken? They look all pretty good. With this stock type of head, you can actually kind of push down on these a little bit and feel everything return. Everything feels all right. Next, you want to look at the valve tips. So coming in close on a valve tip, how does the surface of the valve tip look? Does it look like it's been damaged? Does it look like it's had somebody using rockers with adjusters that are jacked up? These tips of these valves all look pretty good. You'll also find out for sure once you go ahead and take the valves out when you're doing lapping. Do they come out easily? Most times these have mushroomed a little bit just over time from use. So look at that. These have actually, I've cleaned them up when I went to go pull them out, because when you go to pull the valve out of the head, once you're taking it apart to like do porting or cleaning up the head or doing the lapping of the valves, the valve might get stuck, and you had to take a little like emery cloth and or a little bit of sandpaper and clean off the tips right here from where they've mushroomed and they don't catch on the valve guides. Now another thing to do with the heads is once you're doing the valve lapping or there's a valve job being done by somebody else, is like how loose do the valves sit inside of the seats. Those valve seats in there can wear out over time as well if it's not being properly oiled, or if the cylinder heads have overheated it in time. Those valve guides can come loose. Valves, you can get a drop valve, and what that means is that the valve, actually, can you see that from inside of here? Probably not. Nope. Where's my lights? The light on the subject. Hey, look at that. So inside there you can see, that's just the valve. You can't really see any valve guide. So you can't see anything. So you can see some exhaust. That's about it. All right. So what happens is that valve guide gets loose and you have to replace the valve guides. There's special tools for removing Ooh, all kinds, got a light show. For removing valve guides and then reinserting new valve guides with stock application, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but sometimes when they get worn out or jacked up, you have to go to an oversized valve guide because the cylinder head has been jacked up at some point. All right, guys, that's the basics on cylinder heads. Let's go ahead and move on to the final item for inspection before we talk about a list of items that you have to put together for ordering, because this is just to get the list of stuff you need and identify if any of your main components are jacked up. Let's move the cylinder heads out of the way and take a look at the crank. Guys, here we go. This is your standard stock crank. This is a 69mm crank. If you didn't know, a stock is a 69mm. One of the first things that you guys may get when you're looking at this thing is you're gonna be looking at your rods and you're gonna have play back and forth, like side to side. That is not a big deal. If these rods are like really banging back and forth, then you got an issue, but a little bit of play is normal because that's how the oil gets inside of there. Let's zoom in a little bit more to get a better view of what's going down. All right, guys. So you're gonna wanna look at your bearing surfaces on your crank. Bearing surfaces are super important because what can happen is scoring and overheating will happen to the bearing surface itself. And also with your nail, you can run that along here and see if you have issues where grooves from debris or anything else have gotten stuck inside of here. You want to take a look at your bearing surface at all ends. Let's go ahead and move to the front here and take a look at where all your gears and your internal bearing, because you got your front bearing here, like a nose bearing. You got another bearing here, so probably another part of the nose bearing. You got some circlips that go on here, and then you've got the crank gear itself. It's all keyed on with Woodruff keys, and that's something you want to look at too when it comes to your crank. I've already removed the Woodruff keys on this crank, but you want to look at the Woodruff key surfaces. Do they look like they're in decent shape? You can see here where I kind of hit this a couple times, pounding out this this Woodruff key, but that's not a big deal. Is it squared off? Is smooth, which is still smooth. Woodruff key in the front as well, same thing. Do you see any damage, chipping? Is anything missing, like pieces of metal? If it is, then you're gonna have to probably go ahead and have your crank replaced, because having that repaired or fixed is probably not gonna happen. Checking out your surface for where your circlips go. Sometimes when you remove these circlips, you can scratch and score the surface of the actual bearing, the bearing surface here, and that's no good. That'll have to be removed with polishing. Looking at this crank, you can tell that, hey, this is pretty shiny, it looks pretty good. It's because it's already been polished once. I polished this crank by hand because it looked like it was in decent shape when I first took it apart. Something that's different about this crank as well is it's already been doweled out for $8 on the backside. I did that with a tool. There's a tool you can buy that'll allow you just to drill out for an $8 setup, and I did that so I could put a light and flywheel on my car, on my baby, with this 40 horsepower engine. That helps out a little bit with spin up to higher RPMs, but for cruising speeds, having a heavier flywheel sometimes is the better way to go. So what you want to look at when it comes to your rods, So what you want to look at when it comes to your rods is your play if you pull on it. So I'm holding my crank and I pull on it. Is there a lot of play back and forth when I pull on my rods? If there is, then you probably got a problem with your rod bearings. And you might need to have, like, is it catching? Like, do you feel catching inside here? Which there's no catching, really. The test for your assembly, once you get it back together, is the fall over test with your rods. Like, do they fall over easily? Or do they get caught? You can also do that now. If it's getting caught anywhere, then you probably got a problem with your crank surface, and it's gonna have to be ground out. I've never had a crank reground, so I'm not sure how much that would cost. This crank is in pretty good shape, so I'll probably just go back through and clean up the surfaces again, and then replace the bearings inside of the rods at that surface point. These are all standard bearings, and you can tell that when you open it up. Remove the rods. All right, guys. That's the basic inspection of your engine components. That's all we're doing in this part one. I'm gonna turn you guys around and do a little outro. All All right, guys, that is going to do it for today. That's a basic inspection of all the components when it comes to your VW engine rebuild. Now, you want to pay attention to everything that you're putting together when it comes to your list of items you're going to need to pick up for your rebuild, because it's not just the little kit of seals, guys. There's going to be quite a few things you want to look at when it comes to things to order. And don't forget, you're going to want to source around where you're picking up these items, because price is going to vary depending on where you're ordering them from. So go ahead and jump on over to the Facebook group and join up. I'm going to go ahead and list all the items over there. I'm going to go ahead and provide a list in the files area of the Facebook group and what items I'm going to be picking up. Also in the description below, I'll go ahead and provide that list for you guys as well, with links to where I'm picking up the parts for this engine. Quite a few things to do. Bearings for sure. The seals kit. I might have quite a few of the seals already. Push rod tubes, push rods. There's something you need to inspect as well. Dang it, I need to talk about that. Push rods. The aluminum push rods, sometimes they can get loose, so you might want to look at those. You might need new push rods. That's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this first video in the installment of building your stock VW engine. Appreciate all you guys, all my new subscribers. Thanks for joining up. Don't forget, if you want a sticker, a channel sticker, to hit me up in the IM on the Facebook group. Try not to post your address in the Facebook group, because we don't want to be giving that out to everybody. Also, don't forget, you can email me as well. That is located in the description below as well, guys. As always, appreciate everybody. You guys are awesome. Wouldn't be here without you. See you guys on the next one. Looking forward to it. Start doing some rebuild stuff. Yeah. This is Jason with JWClassicVW, and got a little something extra for you guys. Had a little bit of show. Stay tuned after the outro. Went to a little bit of VW gathering. Some cool cars, cool VWs for you to look at. See you guys next time.
Show me how to feel under your control. Everything is real, so hit me. So hit me. So hit me. First a confession. With you, I feel a connection. With you, it's like an infection. I've been infected with an obsession. With you, never any tension. Nothing but love and affection. Enough of my case, so let's cut to the chase. Listen up, cause these are the directions. Obey what I say, don't complain, I don't wanna hear questions. Follow my lead, time to fall to your knees. It's an order, it's not a suggestion. I'm about to teach you a lesson. I recommend you pay attention. This is my kingdom, you're stripped of all freedom. You want nothing but my possession. Head back, hands tied, mouth shut, eyes wide. Baby, I'm yours. I said, baby, I'm yours. Whatever you say, go. Nobody needs to know. Whatever you say, go. Under your control. So hit me. So for the remainder, you were about to get chained up. If ever you feel you're in danger,